Evening. Good evening. Sorry, just sorting my technology out. As always, can I just check that you can see and hear me, somebody? Would you just pop into the chat? Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Welcome back. Welcome back to session 2. Hi, Lisa. Saying hello to everyone. Thank you. I can just see the numbers just slowly increasing as we get nearer to, oh, very quiet. Hold on a second. You see, does that help? Is that better? Maybe I'm just talking quietly. I might be talking quietly, which is very unusual for me because normally I have quite a loud voice, but does that help? Somebody just said I'm very quiet. Hopefully, well, I'll make sure that I keep my volume keep my volume up. But if it does carry on, please just let me know. I know when I ask a question, as I say, it takes a few sort of seconds for it to come back through. So I'll just keep my eye on that. So yeah, welcome back. I can see that, yeah, people are just joining us as I'm starting to speak, so that's fabulous. And, you know, and as always, these sessions are recorded. So for those people that do join late, that's absolutely fine. I just wanted to start, actually. I mean, I was sort of thinking about, even for myself, actually, you know, that where we finished last time about trying to shift the balance of perhaps some of the anxiety and the energy that we create around something like, you know, like change and uncertainty, and particularly transition for our children. And, you know, just thinking about whether you already, you know, practice some of the things that we spoke about in terms of shifting the balance, or if anybody has sort of had a go at that since Tuesday. I know Tuesday probably just feels like that way. It does for me. But so I just wanted to start there, really, and yeah, just any sort of reflections or questions that have come up since last time. As I say, I know when I sort of pose a question, it takes a few seconds for the, you know, for you to get onto your keyboards or whatever and to type into the chat. So I will sort of fill the space for a moment, just to allow you some time to reflect. I mean, it could be anything, actually, you know, anything that might have just popped into your head, or that you thought about since Tuesday, in terms of, I mean, not just anything, in terms of sort of resilient transitions, or your children facing change, or anything that particularly sort of stuck with you, or anything that sort of didn't make any sense and you'd want to just ask some questions. Oh, wow. Somebody's just saying to me that they actually had a go at a breathing exercise with their partner for the first time. It was weird. I hope you mean weird in a good way, and not, I mean, I don't know. For me, it's always just useful to know, because, I mean, something like, you know, breathing, mindfulness, you know, those types of activities, for some people, it is sort of, you know, the answer. And for other people, not so much. And for me, I think that's just a good thing to know. And it's a great conversation to have with our children, right? Because different things will work for different people. You know, and I think that sense of just experiencing sometimes when you actually do have that sort of control to be able to use your breathing to calm your, you know, to calm yourself down, to sort of slow your heartbeat a bit, you know, and you've got, I think that is, you know, can be quite empowering as well. So thanks for giving it a go. And yeah, I hope it was, oh yeah, good weird in a good way. Thank you. And Lisa just sharing, I spoke about feelings and naming emotions with my daughter, who had her first day in year 3 today. Oh, wow, at summer school. She was so nervous, and talking about it shifted nerves to excitement. And it's interesting, isn't it, that I think, you know, that sort of sense of, if we know our children are nervous about something, we sort of don't go there. You know, I better not mention that they're nervous, because that might make them more nervous, or, you know, but actually children are, you know, they're like sponges. I mean, particularly, you know, sort of in primary school, where they're, and so those opportunities, I think, to really, first of all, to make that sort of sense of feeling nervous normal, because if you're doing something for the first time, it's sort of normal to for it to feel a bit anxious and a bit worried about it. But then also that opportunity to be able to talk about that, so you sort of normalize the idea that feeling anxious is not a thing to worry about. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you worry about being anxious, and then that gets you more, before you know it, you're sort of off. So yeah, I think that's any opportunity, I think, to talk about what we're feeling, our emotions, in a very sort of practical, everyday type way, rather than, I think what can help happen is that we sort of only talk about our emotions when we're experiencing negative emotions or something difficult's happened. Do you know what I mean? But we are feeling things all of the time. So, paying attention to that, noticing, and what do we, and as Lisa was saying, like naming them, right? What do we call it, and what's going on in the body when we're experiencing that? So, that was on that first activity, or one of the activities, the resources for children that we suggested. So thank you for that. And somebody else is just being really honest and saying they've been so busy they haven't been able to think about anything. And again, that's absolutely fine and normal, and I think, I don't know, like for me, the more you can sort of almost build into your regular routines the idea that some of the things that we're talking about here actually are important, like we start to value them, that's where I think you really start to sort of gain this sense of being able to have some control, some control and agency over the way we experience situations. Do you know what I mean? And so for me, I suppose I'm just always encouraging to think about, what can work for you, and how can you make sure you really build that in a way which is, which feels authentic and feels right and fits in with your, your busy lives and so on. But because that for me does two things. One, it helps us, right? And two, it models to our children that actually this stuff really matters. And mental fitness is as important as our physical fitness. And, with our physical health, we have to look after it. We have to watch, how we exercise, what we eat, get enough sleep. And mental fitness also means that we've got to do some stuff in order to create that muscle and to sort of develop it and to grow it, So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for being honest, because, yeah, life's busy, right? And you do this and then you get on with your with your everyday. So today's session is really going to focus on growth mindset. So growth mindset is the work of Carol Dweck, a psychologist called Carol Dweck, and we have a reading list for you that I think we've had a reading list that we send out to you. If we haven't, I'll make sure we do. But Mindsets, her book, I mean, I just think it was the best parenting book that I ever read. Most of it, there's only a chapter on parenting. Most of it is about, what is mindset. It's in much more detail than I'm going to cover it here today. But, as a parenting book, it just allowed me to think about how I nurture and support my children in a way which is going to allow them to have more of a growth mindset to life. And my response, actually, the way I spoke to them actually made a really big difference. So we're going to talk about some of that today, and particularly thinking about it in terms of change. So, if you think about some of the beliefs, so remember last time we talked about this idea that there is a link between what we think and how we feel and how we behave. So it's not what happens that leads to how we feel and behave about a situation, but it's the beliefs we have as the things happen that lead to how we feel and how we behave. So these beliefs can have a big impact on the way we deal with change, particularly if those beliefs are, sort of this sense that the change is bad or scary, that because I've got to change, I've got to give up something, and perhaps something I really love doing, and I don't want to give it up, and it means that I'm going to have to. Change you can have beliefs that I'm not in control of change because I'm not quite sure what it is, and I'm out of my comfort zone that we spoke about last time, and so all our beliefs that I'm not in control, and so that sort of gets in the way of change. I think this sort of narrative that change is always hard, and again, I sort of go back to what I was talking about last session on that sort of sense of, you know, when we're learning something, we're out of our comfort zone. We've sort of stretched ourselves outside of what we normally do, you know, and so that sort of sense that change is always going to be hard and difficult, rather than, you know, change is a learning opportunity and change is something that we're going to have to face, and, you know, and it's a development. Do you know what I mean? And I think the last thing is when we feel that change is being done to us and we don't understand it. I mean, think about a time, you know, when you didn't, we know when somebody else told you that you had to do something, you know, you had to change, or something had to change. I don't know, maybe, you know, in your professional life, and there was a reorganization, or, you know, you suddenly were being told not to do one job and to start something else, or to stop using one system. You know, that when we don't feel that we're part of the decision making, that can then lead to sort of, you know, some unhelpful sort of beliefs around change, you know, because it sort of links really that I'm not in control, and, you know, and I don't really have any agency in there. So these are just beliefs that can lead to unhelpful feelings and behaviours. Not always, because some of them, you know, they could also be seen as good, because if you think change is unknown, and so therefore it's scary, that could end up being a good belief, you know, a helpful belief, because it could mean that you do some preparation, or you do some risk management around it, or, you know. So I'm not saying that these are in fact, I'm never saying that beliefs are good or bad, but beliefs can be helpful or unhelpful, because it's our beliefs that lead to how we feel and how we behave. And so if we've got beliefs, you know, sometimes those beliefs mean that they lead to feelings and behaviours which end up being unhelpful to me, given the change or the transition that is ahead of me, if that makes sense. And again, guys, if ever I say anything that doesn't make any sense, or you just want me to clarify, please pop it into the chat, you know, either to everybody or just to me, and I will make sure I cover it off. So Carol Dweck's work, and as I say, you know, I'm only going to go into it into a certain level. So if you are interested, you know, I mean, not that I'm, you know, plugging books. I suppose I am plugging books, but it is, you know, it is a good read. But basically, Carol's work is the sense that we have a set of beliefs about the nature of an ability, right? Something we can do. So a lot of her work sort of focuses on intelligence as a thing, because it helps us think about our beliefs around whether intelligence is sort of fixed or something that is malleable and can grow. But basically, you know, mindsets is set to a sort of a set of beliefs about the nature of ability. And so a fixed mindset is basically two types: fixed and growth mindset. A fixed mindset would say ability can't change. You've either got it or you haven't. You can draw, you know, drawing is something you've either got or you haven't. You know, you're either intelligent or you're not. It's what you're born with. It's that sort of sense of the ability is fixed and permanent, and it can't and won't change. Whereas a growth mindset is almost the opposite of that. That is the ability is not really, you know, the ability is always malleable. You're always able to grow it. So wherever you are, whether you're a terrible drawer or a, you know, a top artist, that ability always has the ability to grow and develop and you know, and to extend. So it's this sense that nothing is really fixed. There's always this malleability around it. And mindsets is interesting because it's not like a personality trait that you either have a growth mindset or, you know, or not. We can have fixed mindset about one ability and not about another. So, you know, I can think that I'm that my intelligence, you know, I can develop my intelligence by learning new stuff, but I'm never going to be able to draw. Because to me, I could have a fixed mindset that says in order to be able to draw, you've just got to have this natural ability, and I don't have it, right? So you can have a fixed mindset about one thing or another. And I can have a fixed mindset about my ability to draw. So I'm never going to be able to draw, but I might have a growth mindset about other people's, because I can recognize, you know what I mean? So it's not that you're somebody that has a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, because it's changeable, or either to yourself or to other people or to the situation. So it's you know, it's you know, a sort of a something to be aware of in terms of our sort of approach to things, remembering that mindsets is a set of beliefs about ability. So, you know, how does this relate to change? You know, if you think about this idea that you might have a fixed mindset that says, I'm just no good with change, I can't do it. You know, I've been there, but I just don't do well with change. You know, leads to one sort of set of feelings and behaviours about change. Or I can have a growth mindset about change that says, well, you know, actually, if I think about it, last time I went through a bit of a change, I learned a load about myself, and actually I can apply some of that into this new situation. That's much more of a growth mindset approach to it. So if you can see how these sort of set of beliefs that we can have that are either sort of fixed, this sort of sense of, you know, you either have it or you don't, it's there and it's fixed, or this sense of growth and malleability and adaptability. So let's just think about this for a minute, and I am going to ask you to just put some things into the chat here. The Bailey family has recently moved to a completely new area where they don't know anybody, right? So they've come from one area to another and they don't know anyone. They've got 2 children. One has special educational needs, and they're both starting new schools. Both children are starting new schools, separate schools, because one has special educational needs, and both parents are starting new jobs. Right? That's the scenario. So if you put yourself into that scenario for a minute, how are they going to respond if they have a fixed mindset about their ability to cope with change? So what do you think? How might let's start with the parents, but actually you can think about the parents or the children. How are they going to respond to this situation if they have a fixed mindset about their ability to cope with the change? What might we sort of hear them saying or see them doing? Yeah, a couple of you putting that they're going to feel overwhelmed. They're going to struggle to adapt. Yeah. They may not do anything actually that will help or help themselves. Yeah. They might not be open to meeting the new people. So yeah, very sort of closed in their sort of responses to, you know, no eye contact, keeping your head down, you know what I mean? Not, you know, that, yeah, panic and tension in the family. I mean, Heather, if you think about it, you know, that sort of sense of, you know, not only are you, you know, just getting on with your everyday life, you know, and as you say, the sort of, you can feel it almost, can't you? The sort of tension and panic within the family, and everybody's sort of feeding off of each other as well. You know, yeah, absolutely. And somebody else just saying, yeah, that they'll just shut down and close in, and yeah, and you know, and it is interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about, you know, you've moved to a new area, and one of the things we spoke about last week, you know, that value, the importance of human connection, you know, and if you got that sort of sense of, well, I'm just no good at being able to deal with this situation, I shut down, and that makes me less attractive and interesting, you know what I mean, to other people, because, you know, if we're not able to speak or have good eye contact with people, you know, but that we're not welcoming, are we, to people? Yeah, might find it hard to reach out for support if they believe nothing can be done to help. Yeah, you're not going to, are you? Because, you know, it's fixed. You know, I just do not have the ability to deal with change. So there's no point me trying to do anything about it, because it's fixed and it's just the way it is. And so, yeah, what's the point of reaching out for help? Because it's not going to help. Thank you. Yeah. And what about if they respond with a growth mindset? What, you know, so they have a growth mindset about their ability to cope and deal with the change. And if possible, guys, because most of you are putting comments into host and panelists, if you choose everybody, then everybody will get to see your comments. You don't have to. You can keep it, because I can relay them back. But if you feel able to just choose everybody, and then people see them. So yeah. So how will they respond if they have a growth mindset to their ability to cope with the change? What might we see them doing or hear them saying? And Heather, I was thinking about your point about panic and tension in the family. What, you know, how might that be different if both the parents and, you know, and actually one or the other, actually, I think would yeah, supporting each other. Yeah. Finding really practical things that could help. Yeah. Looking forward to the new challenges and the new adventures. Again, it's that sort of, in it, you know, moving it from that sort of fear and worry to sort of more sense of anticipation and excitement and, you know, joy into it. Yeah, might be more likely to reach out and to make new connections, and may present changes of new and exciting opportunities. Yeah, absolutely, Lisa. Yeah. Yeah, and so a couple of people saying privately to me, you know, see it as an adventure and an opportunity. It's amazing, isn't it, when you just think about that sense of these set of beliefs that we can have about an ability, and in this case an ability to be able to deal with change. The whole sort of sense of, or, you know, environment around it it just completely shifts, doesn't it, just from one sense to the other. You know, and it's really interesting, because if you think about fixed mindset responses have a very helpless feel to them, don't they? You know, that sort of sense of withdrawing from other people, you know, going into yourself, experiencing unhelpful negative emotions. Because if you think about it, you know, remembering that they're, you know, how I feel is driven by my beliefs about it. And so, you know, if I think, well, I'm rubbish with, I'm never good with change, it's, or, you know, or it's you know, I'm always bad at it, that leads to me feeling anxious, and, you know, and that doesn't help, because remember we spoke about before that, you know, negative emotion means all I'm doing is focusing on that difficult thing, and what I'm not able to do is to problem solve, or to be able to sort of, you know, to deal with the situation, to be resilient to it. Yeah, I think, you know, that sort of sense of helplessness, you know, that I'm useless and I can't make friends. And, you know, you start to think about how the impact of that sort of set of beliefs that we can have start to really play out, not just how I'm feeling and behaving to do with the change, but the knock-on effect that has to other things as well. Because if I'm not able to make those friends in this particular case, you know, when I move to a new area, it makes it much harder the longer and longer I go on into that situation to be able to do it. Something that came up from you guys in there, you know, what's the point of effort? Like, it's, you know, just give up and stop. There's absolutely no point in me seeking help from other people, you know, trying anything new, you know, giving any sort of sense of needing to put any effort or attention to it, because it's fixed. I'm just rubbish with change. I can't do it. I'm no good at it. And so there's no point in me. There's no motivation or sense for me to want to do anything to help myself, you know, in any way. And the last thing I think is that this sort of sense is that, you know, we sort of get blinkered, and so then we can't see any alternatives. In sort of psychology terms, we call this confirmation bias, which you may have heard about. But basically, confirmation bias means that we only see the evidence that supports that I'm right, and we don't see the evidence that tells me that I might be wrong. So, you know, if I think, well, I'm rubbish with change, all I do is see all of the, you know, the information around me that tells me, yeah, I'm rubbish with change. And then someone might say, oh, yeah, but, you know, last time, no, yeah, but, oh, you know, and we bat it. We just don't allow it to come in. Confirmation bias is quite a strong sort of habit we have in our thinking, that means that we just don't allow new information to come in. We have sort of, this very habitual way of seeing a situation, and no amount of evidence, you know what I mean? We just have this sort of barrier up to it that I might not be completely true, right? Because all I can do is see the stuff that supports that I'm right. Yeah, Lisa's just saying it can be quite hard to change someone's mind when they have a fixed mindset. Absolutely. And we're going to talk about, some approaches that we can help, particularly when we see, perhaps noticing ourselves that we have a fixed mindset to something, but particularly when we think about our children and how we can help them really facilitate a growth mindset. Because to me, and we'll, think about this as we go through, a growth mindset is always going to be a better option, right? Particularly when you're thinking about change, uncertainty and transition. To me, it's that sense that growth mindset just gives you that sense of agency, of being able to take a step forward, to just, tipping your toe in. Whereas a fixed mindset has this sense of sort of helplessness and giving up and stopping and, and not moving forward. Because if we think about the opposite, then, so for me, and, through the work, is that a growth mindset is much more hopeful. A growth mindset allows us to focus on the opportunity and the possibility and the excitement of it, A hopeful, a growth mindset gives us much more sense of creating realistic goals, because a growth mindset is not saying, it's not this sort of sense that oh, well, I'm brilliant with change then, but a growth mindset is a set of beliefs that says I can get better, that I can use this as a learning opportunity. And so then you're much more likely to sort of create realistic, got maybe small incremental goals that just help and move you forward, rather than, either you can do it or you can't, which is the fixed mind. So much more hopeful, much more likely to be sort of using self-motivating type beliefs. I've been the new person before. So I will make friends because I've done it before, and think back, what enabled me to make friends. What was it that I was able to do, or what are the sorts of things that I could ask questions, or do some research in the area so I know some stuff. That sort of sense of much more self-motivating. And I think this is so important when we think about hope, and we're going to talk I'm going to sort of talk about the science of hope in a moment. But the expectation to feel anxious when doing something new, for me, this is so important. When we are trying something for the first time, of course, we're going to have high levels of anxiety and sort of, anxiousness about it, or stress about it, because the very nature of doing something new means that I'm trying something. And so therefore I am outside of my comfort zone, because I'm into that stretch learning point. So the more that we understand that it's an expectation to feel anxious, and what does anxious feel like? What's going on in me when I'm feeling anxious? And what level of anxiety have I got? So am I just a little bit anxious, or am I middle anxious, or am I really anxious? Because that then gives me a sense of what I can do, or straight away, by sort of having that sense of understanding, I know what level of sort of recovery I'm going to need for myself, what I'm going to need to do to look after myself to be able to help me to deal with it. And I think the last thing is this sense of being able to notice the good in a situation. So I think a growth mindset leaves us open to be able to really be able to think about what I can be grateful for in a situation. So, I might not be able to do everything. I might make mistakes along the way. I might not, not get everything right, but actually that's just a learning journey. And so that to me just gives a lot more opportunity to be able to notice, I don't know, the one or two things that actually I did quite well, even though I did 5 or 6 things that were not that good. That 1 or 2 things was good, right? And let me try and do a bit more of that. It's much more that sense of, to me, that sort of optimism and opportunity in it. I wanted to just share with you, this is actually quite an old, well, it is not quite, it's no quite bad, it's a very old video now, but I think it still offers a really lovely way of understanding what's going on in our brain when we are learning. And I make this connection to change and uncertainty and transition because for me, all of those things are also us learning. We're learning something new about the situation, about the environment, about how we respond to it. So for me, change, uncertainty and transition are all learning. And so this just, I think, gives a really good sense into the sort of psychology of what's going on when we're learning something. So ignore the fact that it's sort of a bit old, but and be interested to see what you think about it.
As for every single one of us, learning something new means rearranging the way her brain works. Our brain has an astonishing 100 billion neurons, or brain cells, all connected together. Learning is about creating and strengthening pathways through these neurons for impulses of electricity. But between each and every connection in our brains, there's a tiny gap called a synapse. For any of us to learn something new, the electrical signal has to jump across this gap to continue its journey. The gap between the two brain cells is tiny, but that doesn't mean it's straightforward for a signal to get from one side to the other. For us, it's like crossing a deep ravine. And getting from one side to the other should tell us something about the way we learn. The first time a signal crosses from one brain cell to the other demands the most effort, and it's the same when we cross our ravine. The first trip across is the hardest. Having crossed the ravine once, the journeys across get easier and easier. And a similar thing happens when we learn something. To start with, learning is difficult. As the signal crosses the gap between the brain cells again and again, we establish a more solid pathway. Sorry about that. By the time we've made the crossing over and over again, it becomes effortless. We can do it whenever we like. We finally learned something.
So I don't know what you, I don't know what's your reaction to that? What do you think? It's extraordinary when you think about, actually what's going on, and even though these are, there's literally billions of these, these neural pathways that we have, but that sort of sense of just really understanding the process of what's actually happening when we learn something. What do you think? What's your reaction to it? Yeah, it's right. I mean, I don't know what year it was, but it's obviously quite a long time ago. But yeah, it is, isn't it? It's just that really, great sense of, and that what I love about it as well is, that, I mean, for those of you that are you know, not good with heights, apologies, because I'm sure, you know, oh my goodness, but you know, that sort of sense that you're not always going to get it completely right all the way along either, are you? You know, you've got there's sort of stages to it, and it's not like you just suddenly go from here to here and, you know, you don't know something, and, you know, actually there's a lot of different steps along the way. And if you think about, I'm going to share with you the science of hope. It's very, very connected to thinking about both our ability to learn and what's happening when we learn, and also this sort of sense of being hopeful, which is about agency, right? But for when we feel hopeless, we don't feel like we have any control. There's any point. When we feel hopeful, we feel more able to be agents, to be in control of our situation. So the recipe, the science of hope, is basically built around 3 ideas. The first is about setting clear goals that you value. So if you think about some of those beliefs that say, well, you know, what's the point of this change? This change is being done to me and I don't have any sense of why this is important to me. You know, if I value what it is that I'm doing, I'm much more inclined to feel like I'm, you know, to set myself a goal around it. Then once you've got those goals, you've got to be able to define, to be able to see the pathway that will enable you to reach those goals. And that pathway has got to be clear. So in the same way that we saw, you know, in that film there, that there was, first of all, the sense of being able to know, so you need to get from here to here, right? That's the goal. And I have some motivation to want to do it because there's a purpose in me doing it. The pathway then is, okay, first of all, I'm going to throw across the stake and I'm going to, you know, get something secure over the other side. And then I'm going to throw the rope over and I'm going to secure that. And then I'm going to do a nut. You know, each of those are the pathway that I can clearly see that allow me to think about the steps and the progress that I need to make in order to reach the goal, right? So I've got to be able to be able to see it, to define it, and to really be clear in my mind what that pathway is. And then I've got to be able to have this sense of agency that I'm going to be able to follow the pathway. So I have to have some sense of confidence, really, that I'm going to be able to get on the path, you know, and to do it. And, you know, I just love this idea. If you think about hope, is this sense of goals plus pathways plus agency. And if we think about applying this to the change that we're facing, or the uncertainty that we're facing, or the transition, I think you can really start to see how we can help to teach and model and encourage our children through to a more hopeful pathway. So just to give a few cents, so in terms of the research, hope is increased by clear goals with markers, right? So, you know, vague goals create this sense of you know, helplessness, because I'm not really quite sure what it is. It's no good me saying, well, you know, we're going to go across some ravine, which is sticking with the thing, rather than it being clear we're going to go from here to here, and this is the distance of it. Because as soon as I know that, it helps me think about the tools and the resources and what, you know, what I might need to do in order to be able to reach it. High goals is that sense of being able to expand the range of you know, of our hope, but it's not about making it so difficult. So if you think about that diagram that I showed last time of comfort zone, the stretch zone, which is where, you know, which is just outside, and then you add that risk outside of that. A high goal might be some that puts me into that stretch area, but what it's not going to do is shove me into the panic bit. So it's about extending the range of where we are, but it's not about pushing myself too far that it then gets, you know, too sort of dangerous and risky for me. And goals are about a sense of feeling that you've chosen them, having considered all the alternatives. And I think, you know, Lisa was saying, you know, it's really hard to encourage people to have a growth mindset if they, you know, if they've got a fixed mindset. And again, I think this is about the ability to be able to take people with us. It's about being able to have a conversation on a level with our children as we go. So, you know, and there might not be many alternatives, right? It might only be a case of 2 or 3 alternatives, but laying those out and having that conversation and allowing the person to feel like they've chosen the option is much better than just saying, well, you know, look, mum or dad have decided and this is what it is. Much better to be able to, you know, as much as possible to be able to have those conversations, you know, so that we feel part of it. So, you know, and it's the process of setting those goals, I think, which is really important. I mean, on its really simplest level, you know, taking your children with them and helping them choose which school they want to go to, if there is a choice. I mean, I recognise there's not always a choice around it, but, you know, and then being part of that is absolutely key, because it's the process that you go through of deciding, you know, and they're part of that decision that makes the goal, you know, realistic to them, makes it something that they're motivated in. I think if there isn't that choice about just, you know, we stick with the school example, I think then giving choices around it. So, you know, how they might want to get to the school in the first week or the first, you know, and some choices around some of those other things as well. You know, if there's a school uniform, going to the shops and choosing that together, you know. So do you know what I mean? So, you know, I know that, you know, there might be a blazer that's the same, but, you know, choosing the trousers or the skirt, you know, so this creating some sense of being able to put the ability to be able to consider alternatives. So that's goals. Pathways. So the research is about making sure that the pathway acts as the mental means to be able to achieve the change. So as I said before, you've got to be able to visualize the pathway and to be able to think that, you know, you can see it, and so you sort of you know what it is. Stepping is so important, right? It's no good just going from here to here. Actually, most things that we learn, we do it incrementally. And so how can we break down the big long goal into increments? And so, you know, a lot of this is to do with sort of planning and thinking about the steps along the way. And each step should be a stretch from the previous one. So it's not about, you know, keep on putting different steps in that are all at the same level. Each one's got to move us on a little bit and a little bit. You know, say, think about when you're riding a bike, you know, you didn't just, well, most of us don't just get straight on a bike and off we go. There's different things that we do along the way. You know, we might start with a smaller bike, or with stabilize, you know, a balanced bike, and then we might have stabilizers, then we might take the stabilizers off. You know, we have increments to these things. We don't just try and do it all in one way. And change is the same. And what's really important is that failure means that the pathway was ineffective, not the ability. And it's key, if you think about the language that we use when our children might fail, or when we fail at something, trying to think about it, that it's the strategy that I chose, it's the pathway that I chose. That's much more, you know, giving you hope that you've still got the ability to be able to do it, rather than, you know, oh, well, you know, you just can't do it, which leads to hopelessness. You know what I mean? Rather than being hopeful. So, you know, I think it's really important that, you know, you think about being wedded to reality, you know, so as much as possible, trying to make sure that your beliefs about the situation are as accurate as possible. And, you know, and this requires planning. And, you know, just from a psychological perspective, adults are much better at planning than children are, and particularly adolescents. Their brain is just not developed in that way to, you know, to be able to plan ahead. So, you know, sometimes when we think, you know, why didn't you think before you did that? Actually, there is a psychological reason why our children might sometimes do things that because they just haven't thought ahead about it. Adults are much easier to do it. So, you know, knowing that, and not, you know, giving our children a bit of a break around some of that, and, you know, sort of helping them with that planning side of it, can just be a really, you know, good way to lead to a more hopeful position. And then the last area is this sense of agency. So what I mean by agency is this sense that I feel in control and able to be effective in my situations. So I have this sense of belief in myself, which is grounded in reality, which says that, yes, I have got this ability to do it. You know, and encouraging that sort of sense of that ability to be able to have a growth mindset around change, and to recognize that failure is a learning opportunity, and that, you know, learning and change is part of growth and a part of life, and, you know, and developing that sort of sense of a self perception. So, you know, that sense that I can be effective in my situation is, you know, is probably more important than the goals itself. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, everybody can have a goal, but if I've got a goal that I feel there's no sense that I'm going to be able to achieve that, then the goal becomes irrelevant, really. So, you know, that sense of being involved in, you know, in the valuing of those goals, wanting it in the first place, is much more likely to be able to help me sort of look inward and think about, you know, how I'm going to be able to be effective in it. So, you know, effort is required. Right, you know, that sort of sense of thinking about effort and what I'm learning and how much I'm growing, rather than whether I did a good job around the change as a thing. Does that make sense? It's like, it's not that you either did a good job or you didn't, but actually the effort and the learning that went into it is the thing that you focus on. You know, so you're shifting the conversation from whether, you know, you were able to do this thing, whether you've got the ability or not. You know, are you brilliant at puzzles? Are you able to ride a bike? Can you draw a picture? And it much more is a focus on the effort that you've put in, the colours that, you know, if you get with the picture, the colours that you've changed, what you learned about, you know, choosing the colours, or, you know, that is the focus, rather than whether you've drawn a good picture or not, if that makes sense. So that's where the focus needs to be on, the effort and the learning and the encouragement around those things. Recognizing that progress is helpful, and reinforcing that opportunity for the effort and the learning. But again, you know, talking about that side of it. Because this, you know, if you think about anything that you're going to do for the first time, or anything that you're going to do new for the first time, most of those things are going to have some things that get in the way along the way. There's going to be things that stop us in our tracks, and, you know, actually acts as blocking us from moving forward. Because we suddenly have a realization that there is a certain criteria that we might need, that means that we're not going to be able to, you know, to do this. So I don't know, you know, you've gone around and looked at a whole load of schools, and the one that you've chosen is the best, but you know, you haven't got it. You didn't get in there. You know, you're not in the catchment area. You know, there might be something that actually blocks it. And then there are obstacles that can be overcome, but they're just things that sort of get in the way, and, you know, you've got to overcome them. You've got to be able to move around them, and incorporating that idea as a sense of normal. Because, you know, again, when we're doing something for the first time, teaching our children that actually roadblocks and obstacles are part of the course, you know, and they're to be expected, you know, is much more, you know, behaviour to sort of encourage and to sort of model. And, you know, focus, what we're focusing on is important, and simplicity. You know, both of those things matter, because if you think about it, if your attention is focused all on the end game, it's just whether I'm a fantastic drawer or not, then that makes agency difficult, because I'm not a good drawer and I can't see it. But if my focus is on my effort, my learning, and, you know, and the failure bits and what I can learn from the situation, then okay, that makes my agency much easier, much easier for me. And simplicity, you know, if it's too complicated and too, you know, it's hard. What am I actually focusing on here? So, you know, simplicity and clarity, and, you know, are actually really important things, because if we try and do too much or focus on too many things, then that can lead to you know, to lack of agency. in psychological terms, and actually I just want to stop for a sec because someone's just put into the chat a little while ago that the first step is the hardest. And, you know, I absolutely know where you're coming from, and I agree with you. But, you know, it's that sense of taking that step, isn't it, which can be hard, which for me sometimes can be the first step, or sometimes it can be step 8, 9 or 10. Do you know what I mean? And it's this sense that, and I think particularly around change, you know, that you, because you're going into the unknown, you know, it's that sense of you're not quite sure where it's headed. And so, you know, I know exactly what you mean, that the first step, it's almost like each time you've got to just keep taking that step forward and that step forward. And, you know, if you go back to these ideas about making these sort of steps incremental and gradual, that feels a lot more achievable to me than if I've got to go from here to here all in one go. So, you know, giving back that, so yeah, I mean, you know, I agree. And also just think, well, yeah, but don't then think, well, then step 9 and 10 are going to be a, you know, walk in the park, because that might be a, you know, where you hit sort of an obstacle or something you've got to try and, you know, try to re-navigate. So this term agency for us at Bounce Forward is about self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy, I don't know, maybe a term that you know. Often people are not necessarily have heard of it. Often people will talk about self-esteem. And, you know, for us, self-efficacy is very different to self-esteem. So self-efficacy is tangible. It's, you know, I know what it is. Self-efficacy is that self-belief, which is grounded in evidence, which tells me, not somebody else telling me, but I know because my self-belief tells me that I can be effective in this situation. Self-esteem is not as tangible. It's a lot more flaky. And there's, you know, if you think about self-esteem, one, you can have way too much self-esteem. I mean, think about the people you know that have just, and maybe our children that have got way too much self-esteem, right? You can't have too much self-efficacy. And also self-esteem for me is quite flaky. So I don't know, you know, I'm a confident person and I can talk to people, you know, in a situation like this, you know, but sometimes I don't know, someone might say something, it might knock my esteem and I'm not quite sure why. Self-efficacy means that I can draw on a skill or a strategy that I know and that I trust and that I've used before, and that knows that I'm going to be, I can carry on being effective in this situation, and nobody else knows that my esteem has been knocked. So I can have low self-esteem about a situation, but still have high levels of self-efficacy because I, you know, so to build self-efficacy is very tangible, right? There's really 4 ways in which you can build self-efficacy. And again, if you can apply these ideas to supporting your children to deal with change and transition, you are really going to be able to, you know, building their resilience and their, you know, their sort of resourcefulness to be able to deal with situations, whatever situations. And the first is this sort of sense of mastery, right? So, oops, oh, sorry. Hold on. Where have I gone? I've gone too far. Press the wrong button. Oh goodness, what am I doing? There we go. So four sources. So the first is mastery. So this is about using past experience to be able to tell me with confidence that I can master this because I've done something previously that you know that I couldn't do before, and I was able to do it then. So it's that sense of acknowledgement in myself that there are things that I weren't able to do before that I'm now able to do. So what are those opportunities with your children where they might have been thinking or saying, well, I can't do that, and then they were able to do it? All of those opportunities that you've seen as they've grown in the time when they were able to master something that they couldn't do before that they can do now. Their own past experience. And if you think about that, rather than just saying to your kids, you know, oh, you can do it, you'll be fine, having a conversation with them to say, yeah, but look, remember that time when you couldn't, you found it hard holding your pencil, you know, or you couldn't write your name, or, you know, or you couldn't ride a bike, you know, whatever it might be, and actually, you know, talking to them about the ways in which they struggled then and how they got through it and what they needed. So a lot of effort and practice and trial and error and failure, you know, using those real examples that give your children that sense of mastery. The second is accessible role models. And this is so important, particularly for those, if, you know, as our children start to get older, so particularly moving into adolescence. Accessible role models are people a bit like me that can do this thing. So when we give unaccessible role models, I don't know, we choose somebody who's this really inspirational, you know, person on the telly, or, you know, all we do, well, that's not me, because, you know, somebody accessible who I can see myself in them and they've been able to do this thing is much better learning opportunity for you know, for our children, and really essential for our adolescents, because adolescent brains are literally hardwired to notice other adolescents, or to people, adolescents a bit older than them, literally hardwired. Hugely frustrating for those of you who are parents of teenagers and all they want to do is listen to all their mates and everybody else and not you. But again, there is a psychological reason for that. They are literally hardwired to pay more attention to their peers. And if you think about it, it's part of them being able to grow up and to be more independent and to live beyond the family. You know, you think about from a survival point of view, it's actually really important that they start to pay more attention, to notice and to listen to, you know, to people that are their age or a little bit older than them. So if you can find accessible role models who are, you know, are in their sort of, you know, a bit like them, and, you know, that's really useful in terms of building self-efficacy. This sort of sense of communication and seeking perspective is so important in terms of self-efficacy. So it's this sense of being able to know that I've got somebody else who I trust or respect, or is, you know, again, is accessible to me, that I can go and just seek their perspective, either to say to them, look, you know, this thing is coming and I think if I try this, would this help? Or perhaps asking their perspective about how they might go about it. You're building two things there. One is the human connection part, which is so important in terms of our resilience. And two is this sense of talking with other people about either what I think can be useful, because I've got to be able to articulate to somebody else. And so that helps me understand it better because I'm having to find the words to explain it. And this sense of actually seeking other people's perspective is a good strategy for being able to deal with uncertainty. So if you can, you know, one really great thing to do is for you to model this for your children. Think of something where you might need that, you know, you're a bit worried about, or something new that you're going to try. Engage them in a conversation about it. You know, say to them, look, you know, I've got to try this new thing and I'm a bit worried about it. Can I just talk to you about it? Because what would you, you know, can you help me? Because I'd be really interested in, or, you know, how you think it'd be best for me to go about it, or what have you seen other people doing that might help, you know, and modeling that idea of actually getting them to help you. Because then when you want them to listen to you or come to you for it, they're much more likely to do it because you've shown them that level of respect to do it back. And again, the earlier that we can do this with our children, the better, because the more and more they just get used to it. But even for those of you, and there are people on this course who've got, you know, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, don't think it's too late. You know, and again, I think there, you know, there's so much opportunity to be able to model to our children that we are interested and value and respect their perspective in a way which also models the, you know, building self-efficacy. And who knows, they might also tell you something that's you know, that's really useful. And the fourth area is that both your emotional state needs to be calm. You know, you need to be calm. You know, if you think about being effective in a situation, when we are overly excited or overly angry, we're not going to be very effective in the situation. So we've got to be calm enough. So our mood has got to be calm, you know, and ready, you know, right for the situation. And we also have to be physically able to do whatever it is. So, you know, again, this comes back to, if I think about, is my emotional state in the right place here? And if not, then what do I need to do to calm down? You know, maybe I can use some of those calming and focusing strategies that we spoke about last week. I can use some of the 5 ways to wellbeing actions to help me, you know, calm my emotional state down. And am I physically able to do this thing? It's a tangible thing, right? You know, because there may well be a reason why I'm not physically able to do this thing. I mean, think about it in terms of fairground rides, right? You know, you go into, there's a height restriction for a reason on certain rides, because if you're under a certain height, you're not physically able to enjoy that ride in the same way. So, you know, this sense of being able to, this also helps us remain wedded to reality, because at the end of the day, if we're trying to set ourselves a goal which is unobtainable because we're not physically able to do it, then we're setting ourselves an unrealistic goal, whether we're doing that as parents for our children or whether our children are setting those goals for themselves. So, you know, if you think about these 4 areas, all of them are tangible, all of them you can do more of, you know, you can do them and get better at them and master them, and all of them, you can never have too much of any of these things. Right. So going back to my idea of self-esteem, you know, you can never have too much of any one of these things, but building them and using them as your sort of framework, if you like, to sort of help your children develop self-efficacy, that ability that they have, that sense, that self-belief that they can be effective in a situation. I'm going to finish with this quote with, you know, from you know, I forget who what the first name is, but from Snyder around it, you know, who sits behind the recipe of hope. A hero is not just someone who takes dramatic action to help another person, but rather the hero is in the eyes of the adult who takes the time to give the gift of hope. And if you think about that in the context of being a parent, that it's not your job to do everything for our children, it's our job to enable them to be able to do the things that they need to do. And that might be hard as a parent, right? Particularly if you're, do you know what I mean? It's that sort of sense of needing to let go. And, you know, and the earlier we can do that with our children and give them that sense of sort of self-efficacy in their situations, the more that's going to grow and develop as they move on. So this week, you know, you've got all of the materials sent out last week, but this week we're particularly sort of getting you to focus on the resource that's called When I Learned To, I Can, because there's this little activity actually, you know, helping your children think about when they've been able to learn something new before. And a resource about helping them to remember to laugh. So that sort of sense that, you know, even in the most difficult situation, even when we're really anxious about something that we've got to do, we are allowed to laugh. Laughter is free. And if we laugh, we create sense of positive emotion, and positive, what does positive emotion do? Creates neural pathways, means I'm going to be able to problem solve better. So I hope some of that's helpful. I've overrun today only by 2 minutes. Thank you to everyone that stayed through to the end. I hope those people that are watching this on demand are also finding it useful. If you want to join us, if you haven't joined us live yet, it's about half of the people that are joining us live. Please, you know, try to do it at least for one of the sessions, because it's just useful to have your feedback and interaction as we go. And I wish you all a wonderful long bank holiday weekend, and I will see you back here on Tuesday at the same time, 6 o'clock. So enjoy your long weekend. Thank you so much for taking part, and I'll see you then. Bye for now.